I felt like my mom needed another mom, not an eldest daughter, to help her through, dealing with what she was facing with 5 kids. That was the burden that I had to get and the responsibility, I guess. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Podcast. My name is Andi Manzano Reyes, and I'm a mom of 3. And this episode, we're going to talk about our moms, the one who came before us, the one who made us, and the one who brought us up. And I grew up in a family of 5. We're 5 children. Like, when I think about how I was raised, to be honest, I was not the best daughter. I feel like I was the one yung nagre-rebelde at a very young age, and I was not I guess the daughter or the eldest daughter my parents hoped for. I didn't get honor grades. I was not in the best relationships, and I feel like it also contributed because at an early age, I started earning. I started earning when I was 13, and I felt like when I had the money, and I felt like I had that control over my life. So I felt, I had some kind of power with it. And looking back, I always tell my mom, I said, Mom, I was such a hard child. And when I became a parent, that's when I also realized and, how hard it was for my mom. I remember my mom, late at night, she would cry and, wait up for me, and I wouldn't reply or answer her calls. And of all the 5 children, and she was still she had like a 2-year-old, she had a 4-year-old, and I gave her like I should have been helping her, but then I was like a headache. And for me, now that I'm a mom, it 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 really changed the way, I guess, I mother, because I understood that my mom was busy with all 5 kids, and she had her own business. She started her own business, and she did whatever she could. Now that I'm a mom, I feel like, I guess that's why I feel like I'm so devoted to becoming a mom. And I feel like sometimes I'm like a helicopter parent that I just need to be there 24/7. And just really being intentionally there as much as I can. So I feel like that's how, I mean, Mom, I love you. I'm not saying you weren't there for me, but it was just more like I just want to be there for my kids and open, and open, and having that safe place where they can talk to me about feelings and relationships and problems. Especially now that I have a tween, there are times that she does answer me back. There are words that we exchange that that like the mother and daughters do. And for me, that triggers me because that reminds me so much of how I was when I was a kid. And and sometimes, like, I have to catch myself when we're exchanging words, and we're arguing. I have to catch myself, and I have to be like, Olivia, wait. I said, give me time, give me time. And sometimes I go to the bathroom and then I cry. And I'm just like, I'm full of emotion. I don't know what to do. And sometimes I'm like, am I doing this right? And I just go back, and then I hug her, and then I say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for, for Mom saying these words, for not listening to you first, and, not giving you the chance to speak. And for me, that was already healing for me, because my mom has a tendency to just keep talking, and, just for me, I wanted to hear out my children. I wanted to give them that space that, whatever it is, you can tell me anything. If you have big emotions, we'll deal with it together. If you have, problems in school, I just want them to know that they can talk to me about it. So, yeah, that's the trigger. There's so many issues that we have as children as we grow up. We have trauma, there are things, problems, or situations that we don't want to face, but when you become a mom, you have to go full on, head on. You really have to face these problems. You can't hide from it anymore. And for me, it's really what I want my children to know and to grow up as is knowing that they're enough. That they don't have to prove anything to anybody. And I felt like when I was growing up, the more work I had, the more money I brought into the family, or if I had good grades, or if I was successful in this, then um, I felt like I was more important, and I had to, I guess, let go of that image and say, you know what, it's not about those things. And I had to learn it also the hard way, because I mean, up to now, as much as possible, it's always okay. How, like, where's my work? Where's, how do I bring in the money even for this family? But then, what I've learned when I look at my kids is when they look at me, that I'm enough, that I don't have to give them anything for them to love me. It's just they look at me and they're just like, "Mom, I love you," and it's who I am, not because of what I do. And for me, that's how motherhood it just ruined the whole thing. That's how motherhood healed my inner child. This is freeing. When you actually talk about it, feels freeing, because these are things that you don't really think about or reflect about, because being a mom, sometimes you're so busy and you have no time to reflect, and the only thing you reflect on is what happened yesterday or the past few days. So when I think about my childhood, and when I think about what I've learned and what I want to bring to becoming a mom is, I was an eldest daughter, and my parents got married very young, and I was like the trial, I was the trial child. So when I look at the way my mom raised my younger siblings, it's completely different. And I saw a lot of things when I was younger. There were a lot of fights. Not just with my parents, but we also grew up in a household where fights were normal, and I was that eldest child who would shout and say, "Stop fighting!" I had to be brave. I had to step up. Sometimes when I talk to my mom about it, I say, "Mom, you know what? We grew up together as moms. You had an eldest daughter, but I also grew up as a mom." And my mom would, sometimes hug me, and, she would say, "I'm sorry." And I would be like, "Yeah, I did have a long childhood." Ah, why are we dwelling into this? I did have a long childhood, because I was already a second mom, because I felt like my mom needed another mom, not an eldest daughter, to help her through, dealing with what she was facing with 5 kids, where we were living as well, and even earning for the family. So that was the burden that I had to get, and the responsibility, I guess. Now that I have kids, I try to protect them, and, make them enjoy their childhood as much as they can. Let them enjoy being young. Let them, not have that responsibility or that burden of what I had, I guess. And one thing also that I do and I've learned is, I speak to my children, and I encourage them, and I guess I never had that. I would always, I would get the I love yous, of course. I would get the lambings, but the way that I speak to my children was how I wanted my mom to speak to me. Gosh. So for me, it's really a big deal of how powerful it is to speak to your children at such a young age, that, just saying, what, you're beautiful, you know, you're smart, you're kind, all these things, like it has an impact on them. And that's what I've learned. That's, gosh. So I feel like that's how I'm also gonna protect my children, but at the same time, you know, I guess, like, speak life in their life. Sometimes I think, and I reflect on, am I the kind of mom that I needed as a child? And I mean, as much as possible, I want to say yes, but I'm not perfect, but I really, honestly, every day, every minute, try to be that kind that I needed. I try to be more patient in the little things. And this Mother's Day, maybe you can also reflect on the question that I threw at myself a few days ago. What kind of mom did you need when you were a child? Or what kind of mom would heal your inner child? And, like for example, my mom was so young when she had me. And I I now give her so much grace and now so much more understanding of what she went through. Also giving yourself grace at the same time because you're also healing a lot of parts in your life, and trying to figure it all out at the same time and trying to not give the trauma that you had or pass down any trauma to your child. So reflect on that and be the mom that you needed. This is Andi Manzano Reyes, and I hope you had fun listening to the Soul Podcast.
Yeah.